I want to begin with a recording that you made in which you and Melania Trump are talking about her legacy. And it's really fascinating to hear her kind of just speak in this way. Let's listen.
Sure. That's fine. Who supports Melania? You do have a legacy.
Yeah, but then, well, it doesn't come directly from what I put on Twitter came from me. They know about the children, and they talked about it.
But I'm just saying, you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying, right? I mean, you do know what I'm saying. You shouldn't have people across the world. It's in New York. It was always Melania. Like,
I don't give a.
It's not about giving a.
It's true. It's honestly, it's like, because it's honestly, I'm doing the same stuff that I did before. They cannot stand him. They know that I'm with him. They know that I'm.
But they felt badly for you before. Now that you know what I'm saying.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Okay. All that stuff came out. They feel bad for me. My polls went up. They said, "Oh my God, she's amazing. She's fantastic."
Hello guys, Adam is here. So this is happening. Melania Trump has reportedly detonated a crisis inside the White House. Secret audio recordings and deliberately leaked conversations point to a full-blown war between the First Lady and her husband's operation, the kind of internal collapse that can unravel an entire presidency.
What did you think when you heard that? And I mean, it's so interesting because there was this whole idea of sort of, people felt bad for her, that she's with this guy and she's sort of trapped in this situation. Is that it doesn't seem like that's the reality at all.
Well, Anderson, I just want to first start by saying that, when I first started taping Melania, I had already left the White House and had already been accused of a criminal crime. And I mean,
they threw you under the bus, basically.
Very, very much so. The Trump administration, as well as the Presidential Inauguration Committee, tandemly created a narrative that I wouldn't follow, and I needed to be the scapegoat. With that being said, I truly, genuinely went into planning the inauguration with honor. It is the United States of America, and helping the First Lady set up her East Wing office. Unfortunately, there were too many roadblocks in the way. So for Melania to create a legacy was going to be challenging regardless, just because of the palace intrigue inside the White House between the East and West Wing, between Ivanka and Melania. And, she didn't have the support at first that she needed at all, quite honestly.
So, Stephanie, I want to play another conversation you had with the First Lady. This one is about her trip to the border when the Trump administration was separating kids from their parents and detaining them. Let's listen.
Let me paint the scene for you, because the sheer audacity of what triggered this explosion is almost impossible to believe. Donald Trump made a decision. Not a policy decision, not a national security directive, but an aesthetic one. He decided with absolute certainty that he wants to demolish the historic East Wing of the White House.
All these kids that I met, they are here in the shelters because they were brought by it through coyotes, the people, or trafficking. And that's why they put them in jail. And the kids that they go in shelters, and the way they take care of them, it's, they even said, the kids, they say, wow, I will have my own bed. I will sleep on the bed. I will have a cabinet for my clothes. It's so sad to hear it, but they didn't have that in their own countries. Right. They sleep on the floor. They are, they're fed. They are taking care nicely there. But, they are not with parents. It's sad. But when they come here alone or with coyotes or illegally, you need to do something. Right. And a lot of like moms and kids, they.
The East Wing, the architectural landmark that has stood as part of the presidential complex since it was rebuilt generations ago? He wants to level it, reduce it to rubble. And for what purpose? To erect a ballroom. A massive, sprawling, gold-plated monument to his own ego. And the price tag attached to this vanity project is a cool $300 million. That is not a misplaced decimal point. That is not an exaggeration for dramatic effect.
They are taught how to do it.
Of course.
They go over and they say like, oh, we will be killed by gang member. We will be it's so dangerous. So they allow to stay here. Do you understand?
I
what I
do.
mean?
And they're the ones that are the bad ones.
Yeah, and they are not, it's not true that they would, you know what I mean? Some of them, they're using that lines that, they're not professional, but they're taught by other people what to say to come over and to let them go to stay here. Because, they could easily stay in Mexico, but they don't want to stay in Mexico because Mexico doesn't take care of them the same as America does.
You also had a conversation with the First Lady about her role as First Lady and some of her duties, including Christmas at the White House. I want to play that.
$300 million to tear down history and build a dance floor for the elite. Now, your initial reaction might be a shrug of resignation. Typical Trump, you might think. He has always been obsessed with gilded excess, with turning everything he touches into a shimmering palace of self-congratulation. But here is where the narrative takes a hard left into uncharted territory. Melania, his wife, the woman who stands beside him in the official portraits, has been caught on tape disavowing the entire operation, not just expressing mild reservations, not just suggesting a budget trim.
They say I'm complicit. I'm the same like him. I support him. I don't say enough. I don't do enough.
No.
Where I am, I'm working like my ass off.
I know.
That Christmas stuff that, who gives a about Christmas stuff and decoration, but I need to do it, right?
Yeah, but imagine 100%. You have no choice.
And then I do it, and I say that I'm working on Christmas, planning for the Christmas, and they said, oh, what about the children, that they were separated? Give me a break. Where they were saying anything when Obama did that?
I know.
I cannot go. I was trying to get the kid reunited with the mom. I didn't have a chance. Needs to go through the process and through the law.
But here's my thing. Hear what you just said. But instead of that, if your messaging, you were so loved.
They would not do the story. We put it out. They would not do the story.
I'm telling you.
You would not believe it. They would not do the story because they would not do the story because they are against us because they're liberal media. Yeah, if I go to Fox, they will do the story. I don't want to go to Fox.
She has privately informed her inner circle that she wants absolutely nothing to do with the project. She has raised pointed, damning concerns. The vibe, and I am paraphrasing the raw sentiment leaking from these recordings, is that she considers the entire endeavor absurd, a grotesque misallocation of resources, and she refuses to lend it a single shred of her public support. And then those recordings leaked. Through whatever labyrinth of backstabbing and political maneuvering defines this administration's internal culture, the audio of Melania's private rebellion escaped the palace walls and detonated in the public square. The result is a spectacle of self-immolation. The MAGA movement, that supposedly unbreakable monolith of conservative unity, is currently ripping itself into competing factions over a ballroom and a First Lady's betrayal. You have the die-hard Trump loyalists forming a protective phalanx around the president, defending the demolition as if it were the construction of the Temple of Solomon. On the other flank, you have a growing chorus of MAGA populists looking at the $300 million price tag and comparing it to the cost of groceries, gas, and rent, and they are furious. And trapped in the middle of this ideological crossfire is Melania herself, who appears to have abandoned the strategy of silent endurance and is now actively, if covertly, making her opposition known. That internal rebellion is metastasizing into a massive political liability for Donald. Can you absorb the sheer improbability of this moment? The First Lady is effectively staging an insurgency against the president's prized vanity project, not from a podium, but through a shadow campaign of recorded whispers and strategic leaks. This is not a West Wing script. This is a reality show operating at a Shakespearean level of domestic treachery. The documentation behind this is ironclad. According to a deeply sourced report from the Wall Street Journal, a legacy outlet with a track record of rigorous verification, Melania Trump privately shared her deep misgivings about the East Wing demolition with associates. She explicitly informed them in no uncertain terms that this was not her project. She is actively distancing herself, creating a chasm between her public image and this expenditure of taxpayer or donor funds. Administration officials, those who walk the corridors and overhear the hushed conversations, confirmed these details to reporters. This is not conjecture, not a conspiracy spun up by a partisan blog. This is documented, corroborated fact, sitting in the public domain like an unexploded artillery shell. Now, consider the catastrophic timing of this revelation. Donald Trump is perpetually navigating a minefield of approximately 17 distinct controversies at any given moment. That is simply his baseline operational tempo. But to have your own spouse, the person who theoretically shares your living quarters and life, actively undermining a project that is so clearly dear to your heart, is a psychological and political wound of a different magnitude. This is not some distant advisor jockeying for position. This is the woman who knows him best broadcasting to the world that she considers his taste and priorities to be profoundly flawed. And this is not just any project. It is a $300 million wrecking ball aimed at a historic landmark, a cost that will almost certainly be borne on the back of the American taxpayer. The narrative writes itself. While families struggle to fill their gas tanks, the Trumps are fighting over the gold fixtures in a palace ballroom. Here is the layer that makes this even more explosive and, frankly, more puzzling. Melania Trump has been burned by secret recordings before in the most catastrophic way possible. Cast your memory back to the previous election cycle. Her former confidant and senior advisor, Stephanie Winston Wolkoff, released a treasure trove of secretly recorded audio tapes. In those recordings, Melania was heard complaining about the burden of Christmas decorations in language so vulgar and dismissive that it shocked the political world. She was heard mocking detained migrant children. The fallout was brutal, a public relations firestorm that painted the First Lady as callous and detached. So, Melania is intimately familiar with the scorching heat of leaked private conversations. She knows the risk. She has lived the humiliation. And yet, here we are, in a new term, and once again the hidden microphones have captured her unfiltered thoughts, and once again those thoughts have escaped into the bloodstream of the news cycle. But this time, the stakes are entirely different. The previous leaks were about personal attitude. They were character studies. This leak is about power. It is about a direct clash of wills between the president and the first lady over a high-stakes spending decision that defines the administration's domestic priorities. The recordings are not just embarrassing tidbits this time, they are active political uranium. They are sparking a tangible political fallout that is rewriting the calculus inside the Republican coalition. We are now talking about policy, optics, and the future physical footprint of the White House complex. And the MAGA base, which typically marches in lockstep to the beat of Trump's drum, has fractured into a cacophony of conflicting voices. On one side of the Civil War, you have the fundamentalist Loyalists. Their argument is straightforward and unyielding. Donald Trump won the presidency, he owns the mandate, and if he decides the White House needs a ballroom worthy of Versailles, then strap on your hard hats and start swinging the wrecking ball. To them, any criticism, even from the First Lady, is tantamount to disloyalty. On the opposing side, you have the economic populists, the wing of the movement that genuinely channeled working-class anger over trade deals and stagnant wages. These people are looking at the $300 million figure and recoiling in disbelief. They signed up to drain the swamp, not to install a crystal chandelier above it. For them, this ballroom is a gross betrayal of the America First economic message, a glaring signal that the elites are feasting while the base is footing the bill. And then there is the emerging Melania faction, a strange bedfellows coalition of observers who argue that if the First Lady, a woman famously protective of her privacy and image, thinks this is a catastrophic miscalculation, perhaps we should listen. This is the anatomy of a political movement turning its knives inward. The Wall Street Journal broke the story on consecutive days in late October, and the timeline of its virality is a case study in modern information warfare. Within hours, the narrative was picked up by aggregators and political channels. By the end of the month, YouTube videos dissecting the Melania ultimatum were racking up view counts in the hundreds of thousands. The public consciousness has latched onto this saga because it contains every element of a classic American melodrama: vast sums of money, the raw exercise of power, an intimate betrayal that reeks of marital tension, the shadowy art of secret recordings, family dysfunction spilling onto the global stage, and complete, unadulterated political chaos. And here is the phrase that is cutting deepest into the West Wing's morale. Melania, according to multiple sources who have spoken to reporters, told her associates 4 devastating words: "I want nothing to do with it." That is not a diplomatic hedge. That is not a, maybe we should form a committee to study the feasibility. That is a decisive, almost brutal withdrawal of support. The subtext is a flashing neon sign: count me out. This is your disaster, not mine. Coming from a first lady toward a sitting president, that is a declaration of rhetorical independence that is virtually unprecedented. So, strap yourself in, because we are about to plunge headfirst into the wreckage of how a $300 million ballroom became the detonator that ignited the largest internal inferno the Trump administration has ever faced. Let's unpack the machinery of this meltdown layer by layer, because the ballroom is merely the surface symptom of a much deeper pathology inside the White House power structure. This story is a prism that, when held to the light, reveals the hidden fractures in the MAGA coalition, the shifting tectonic plates of the Trump marriage, and the deeply unsettling question of who is actually steering the ship of state behind the scenes. First, let's dwell on the sheer architectural madness of the East Wing demolition. The East Wing is not a tool shed. It is a piece of the nation's physical history. It was reconstructed in the mid-20th century and has served as the functional nerve center for First Lady's staff, visiting dignitaries, and emergency operations. Trump wants to sweep it away and replace it with what he internally pitches as a grand ballroom. On its face, one might naively assume the White House simply requires additional event capacity, perhaps a bigger room to host state dinners. But no. This is Trump unfiltered, Trump the builder, Trump the brander. This is about etching his name into the literal stone of the White House complex. It is about creating a space so opulent that every future president who hosts an event there will be forced to utter his name. And the toll for this legacy? $300 million. Let me ground that number in reality. The entire annual budget for the upkeep of the White House, its gardens, its electrical systems, its painting, its plumbing, is a fraction of that figure. Trump wants to vaporize 2 decades' worth of maintenance budgets on a single room. A room where champagne flutes clink and wealthy donors feel admired while the rest of the country is grinding through inflation that has turned grocery shopping into a high-anxiety financial event. Enter Melania. According to the administration insiders who bared their souls to the Wall Street Journal, and these are people who touch the machinery of government daily, Melania has been a quiet whirlwind of opposition. She has told associates repeatedly that this concept was never her brainchild. She has made it explicitly clear that her fingerprints are not on the architectural drawings. Most critically, she is no longer adhering to the code of silence. In previous iterations of the Trump political circus, Melania's strategy was sphinx-like silence, an absence that allowed observers to project whatever they wished onto her. That era is over. She is talking. And you know exactly what that means in a city like Washington, a town built on the barter of secrets. When a principal tells a small circle of trusted associates something, that information is already halfway to the front page. Washington runs on the currency of gossip. Discretion is a myth maintained only by those who need future favors. Melania has spent enough years orbiting the inferno to understand this perfectly. So, her decision to verbalize her disgust is functionally indistinguishable from a decision to leak it herself. It is an intentional act of political sabotage wrapped in the guise of private venting. Why is she doing this? Why is the First Lady, who theoretically shares a last name and a financial portfolio with the president, actively pouring gasoline on his beloved project? The theories swirling around the Capitol range from the coldly strategic to the deeply personal. The strategic theory posits that Melania is simply right on the merits. She possesses a keen, perhaps underappreciated instinct for public relations. She sees that a $300 million ballroom is an unmitigated optical nightmare. It hands the opposition a club made of solid gold. It makes the administration look staggeringly out of touch, bewilderingly tone-deaf. It alienates the very blue-collar suburban voters who form the fragile outer ring of the Trump coalition. From a pure political survival standpoint, opposing this ballroom is the smart play. She is trying to save him from himself, and when he refused to listen, she took the fight to the court of public opinion via leak. The personal theory is spicier and more cinematic. Melania is weary of being sidelined. For years, the political narrative has portrayed her as the reluctant participant, the woman trapped in a role she never fully embraced. But what if that is a mask? What if she craves influence, yet has been consistently locked out of the decision-making loop? This project is a massive financial and physical legacy decision, and Trump steamrolled ahead without her blessing. For a First Lady who has spent her tenure being treated as background decor, this might be the breaking point. This is her asserting agency, her way of saying, "You will not ignore me, and if you try, I have the power to embarrass you." Then there is the darkest of the theories, whispered in the corners of the political dark web. The recordings are not just an act of frustration. They are an act of deliberate warfare. This theory suggests the marital tension that has been analyzed for years. The hand swats, the stiff body language, the separate living arrangements, has curdled into something approaching strategic opposition. Perhaps Melania is finished with the supportive spouse performance. Perhaps she views these controlled detonations of leaked audio as a way to accumulate leverage and shape her own post-White House future, even at the expense of her husband's political capital. Regardless of the motive locked inside her skull, the impact is radiating outward with devastating force. The MAGA movement, long seen as a cult of personality impervious to internal dissent, is displaying visible stress fractures. Influential talking heads in conservative media are cautiously beginning to question whether Trump's judgment on this matter is warped. Grassroots activists who used to spend their energy fighting liberals are now spending it fighting each other on social media over whether the ballroom is a monument to winning or a monument to vanity. The Trump family insider dynamics, long suspected to be a viper's nest, are now publicly visible. Reports had surfaced in financial and political outlets predicting a chaotic Trump White House rife with internal MAGA divisions. Those predictions have curdled into observational fact. The chaos they warned about is here, and it is being propelled by Melania's secret recordings and her strategically ambiguous public silence. Let's drill down on the financial absurdity once more, because the dollar amount is the engine driving the controversy. $300 million is a sum so vast that the human brain struggles to comprehend its utility. It could fully fund dozens of struggling public school districts. It could revolutionize veteran healthcare infrastructure. It could resurface thousands of miles of crumbling highway. Instead, it is destined to be poured into a gilded party room accessible to the elite. And people are noticing. Even loyalist strongholds are showing signs of agitation. On digital platforms where political debate ferments, the comment sections under this story are a battlefield. You see the true believer Trump apologists shouting down anyone who criticizes the boss. You see the anti-Melania crowd attacking her as a snake in the grass, a fifth columnist undermining the movement from within. And you see the disillusioned populists, the ones who once chanted "drain the swamp," suddenly realizing the swamp might have just installed a ballroom. The viral metrics on this story confirm that it has penetrated the mainstream consciousness. Videos analyzing the meltdown are gathering massive traction, with some topping hundreds of thousands of views within days of the original leak. The complexity deepens when you realize this ballroom scandal is not a standalone event. Trump is juggling a multitude of legal and political headaches simultaneously. Investigations are grinding forward. Court battles are stacking up. Political fights on legislative fronts are bogging down. And now, into this already toxic mixture, drops the radioactive element of Melania's rebellion. It is a distraction that a focused administration cannot afford. It saps the president's emotional energy, it dominates the news cycle, and it gives permission to allies to start asking aloud, is he okay? Is he making the right calls? And the history of the tapes haunts the present. The ghost of Stephanie Winston Wolkoff hangs over this crisis. The last time Melania's private voice hit the airwaves, it was a disaster of her own making. She complained about the tedious labor of holiday decorating in foul language. She dismissed concerns over migrant children with chilly indifference. The lesson learned from that episode should have been that loose lips sink ships, or at least cause massive political embarrassment. Yet the recording devices seem to still be running. This raises a ghostly, lingering question. Who is doing the recording? Is there a mole in the East Wing? A staffer with a grudge and a pocket recorder? Is this the work of political opponents who have managed to penetrate the inner circle? Or is this the most cynical interpretation, that Melania herself, or someone acting on a nod from her, is engineering control leaks to strategically bleed her husband's credibility? If there are recordings about the ballroom, what else is on those hard drives? What other private judgments about policy, family, and the future of the movement are waiting to be dropped at the most politically advantageous moment? The existence of a tape library of Melania's unfiltered thoughts is a sword of Damocles swinging over the West Wing. So, what is the trajectory of this slow-motion train wreck? A few divergent scenarios stretch out from this moment. The first, and historically the least likely given Trump's psychological profile, is capitulation. Trump could simply announce that after listening to the wisdom of his brilliant wife and the concerns of the American people, he is canceling or massively scaling back the ballroom project. Perhaps a renovation that only costs $10 million, or maybe donating the space for a new historical archive. That would defuse the immediate civil war. It would allow Melania to look like a quiet heroine who steered the ship away from the rocks. But Donald Trump does not retreat. Doubling down is his instinct. Admitting error, especially one that validates Melania's critique, is not an option in his psychological repertoire. The second scenario is the steamroller. Trump ignores the chaos. He ignores the leaks. He ignores the furrowed brows of the fiscal conservatives and the barbs of his wife. He pushes forward, betting that once the ballroom is complete, the sheer spectacle of its golden opulence will silence the critics. This is a long-term gamble with a high risk of failure because the construction timeline stretches into an election cycle. Every budget hearing, every construction delay, every cost overrun will bring the story roaring back. The ballroom will become an eternal albatross, a physical symbol of excess. The third and most viscerally dramatic scenario is the continued drip, drip, drip of leaked audio. If there is a library of recordings, this is just the opening salvo. Imagine a series of strategic releases. Melania discussing donor schemes. Melania criticizing key allies. Melania making cutting remarks about the president's health or judgment, drip-fed to the public at moments of maximum vulnerability. This would not just be a civil war, it would be a siege. The White House would be paralyzed, constantly bracing for the next audio grenade to roll across the floor. Zooming out to the macro-political landscape, this story is a devastating blow to the core brand proposition of Trumpism, strength and competence. It projects radical weakness. A leader who cannot even secure the loyalty of his own household presents a difficult image to sell as a global strongman. It shifts the media narrative from policy victories to palace intrigue. It hands the opposition a perfect weapon. Even his wife thinks he's being a reckless, out-of-touch fool. That ad writes itself. So here we stand, watching a first lady who has stopped keeping quiet, watching a movement that is tearing at its own seams over priorities and spending, and watching a president who is facing a rebellion not from the usual suspects, but from his own residents. This is the MAGA Civil War, and the $300 million ballroom is the burning citadel around which the battle rages. Trust me, you are going to want to keep watching because the next leak might just be the one that brings the entire edifice crashing down.